Since the days of the first wooden vessels, all ship masters have had one happy privilege to watch Star Trek and discuss it with their friends. Welcome to Starbase 80. Hello! Happy Sunday to you. Thank you for joining us here at Starbase 80. I am Captain John, your congenial host. This is me being congenial. That's congenial. Welcome to a show where basically I watch a Star Trek episode with my friend, and then I find out how he feels about it. And of course, my friend is not just any friend. I mean, I have wonderful friends, but seriously, this guy, head and shoulders above the rest. Would you please welcome number one, my first officer, best damn XO in the fleet, Flobo Boyce. Good morning, Mr.
Good morning. You know what? Are you feeling extra congenial today? I feel it, bro. I totally feel it within my core. So glad to be here, Starbase 80.
Congeniality in the air, much like that purple mist in the phaser room. In the air.
Yeah.
I realized, of course, as the credits are playing at the beginning of the show, and I'm like, look at my notes and stuff, and I look up and I go, oh, I put together the credits, the opening credits for Starbase 80. I forgot to mention our special guest host this week. Oh my God. How could I not even
He's going to leave.
Tribute?
He left. He probably was so offended. He was like, forget this.
He's still here. That's what kind of excellent man he is, ladies and gentlemen. Joe Townsel joining us here on the show.
Thank you, guys. I as you caught me doing just now, I was just kind of taking some deep breaths, calling upon my own congeniality since you so blatantly omitted me from the opening credits. But that's no, seriously, man. This is a last minute treat for me. So thrilled to be here, and I can't wait to get into it.
What excites me about this episode, it is unofficially a crossover with Commander's Log.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Commander's Log this week, where we watched the 10th and final episode of Strange New Worlds. What was that gosh darn episode called?
A Quality of Mercy.
Oh, Townsel, your mind is a steel trap.
I'm gonna have a job soon. I don't know, Captain. What was it called? But
it was a really great episode of Strange New Worlds.
Yes,
and it did something that has been done before on Star Trek in a very, very unusual kind of way, which is if you look at the Trouble with Tribbles. And then Trials and Tribulations. What you had is a later, what am I looking for? Episode of a Star Trek show that crosses with an earlier episode of a Star Trek series.
Well, later interpretation and enhancement, basically.
Very well said, Mr. Townsel.
Thank you.
And gives you that Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead kind of flip of focus. And we see it from this point of view now, and a different version of it And it's funny. This is not an episode that was, if you will pardon the pun, on my radar or sonar, as the case may be. But it is, of course, a classic episode. I just hadn't seen, I didn't see it coming on Strange New Worlds that they would so heavily reference the episode we're talking about today, which is from Star Trek TOS, Those Old Scientists.
Those old scientists.
The original series. And this beautiful episode, this lyrically wonderful. Okay, I'm just giving away how much I love this episode. This episode plays so heavily into Strange New Worlds, and it is, I think it's so right to reference this episode, especially when talking about Romulans, who in Star Trek lore are very consistent throughout all the Star Trek series and even movies in terms of what badasses they are. But this takes you back to the introduction of Romulans. And I'm very excited about that. Joe Townsel, what are your feelings going into watching Balance of Terror again? And when is the last time you saw it?
Well, the last time I saw it, who knows? I mean, I periodically check out all Star Treks that I love, and this is one of them, of course, all episodes.
Yeah.
It's been years easily. Going into it this week again, under these circumstances, they're kind of putting would it be the horse before the cart? I'm not sure what the terminology would be in terms of discussing Equality of Mercy. Right. I'm also going to be very curious to hear Flobo's thoughts, having not seen the episode before, Equality of Mercy, because I do very much agree with John's take on the Trouble, Tribbles, and Trials and Tribulations. As great as the original episode is, I can't imagine you would enjoy it as much if you saw Trials and Tribulations first.
Mr. Boyce, I'm going quickly over to Keith Jacobson in our comments. While I always look forward to SB80, I've been wondering how not seeing Balance of Terror would affect one's enjoyment of the last episode of Strange New Worlds, which is exactly the question I want to ask you, Mr. Boyce.
Yeah.
Just in general terms, we don't need to break it down quite yet, but in general terms, how did you feel going from Quality of Mercy to Balance of Terror?
When I was a teenager, there was a video game called Grand Theft Auto Vice City. I'm sure you've heard about it.
One of the best games ever.
One of the best. It's my top three of all time. Rest in peace, Ray Liotta, who voiced Tommy Vercetti. 80s cocaine era. Just it was a great time being able to walk down South Beach with a machete slicing up people and having cops going, "Hey, stop!" Years after I played that game, I watched a classic called Scarface. Which the game was referenced. So I basically did it in reverse. And so while I thought Scarface was cool, since I actually played the game with my own hands, it didn't really hit for me. And that's the thing that's really happened this week. So seeing the alternate universe on Commander's Log this week and Strange New Worlds, I loved it. Going back to this week, kind of felt like reading an old research paper, man. It was, I won't say the B word, but I was not entertained throughout. It was kind of hard. John, come back! John! It was kind of stiff, man. It's kind of dense. So, yeah. So that's your question, Keith.
There was one distinct advantage of watching Balance of Terror in hindsight, so to speak, and that is it brought me even closer to John's feeling about Paul Wesley as Kirk. Because
thank you.
Seeing Shatner here, there's no comparison.
I mean,
it's an alternate universe, man. Alternate.
That's what I said. I still stand by it, but I'm a little bit shifted to,
Look, Paul Wesley is a fine actor. I had no terrible negative reactions toward him as an actor, but Kirk is one in a lifetime. There just are not a lot of Kirks. I like Chris Pine as Kirk. Yeah. Flobo, do you like Chris Pine?
I like them both as Kirk. If you were, I mean, again,
you like the new guy with the skinny chest as much as Chris Pine?
Yeah, Chris Pine to me, and again, please, if you guys want to hit me with your hate mail, it's at Flobo Boyce on Twitter.
Controversy equals cash.
I know, right? That's me, Daddy. I'm going over. Chris Pine for me is like the id of Kirk, the swashbuckling side, right? But Shatner will always like think to himself and then do it. And so Paul Wesley was kind of like the super ego. He was like most of the brooding side of Kirk. So I enjoy them both. If I had to choose and say, hey, look, this is how you get a new interpretation. Yeah, Chris Pine would be a lot easier, a lot accessible. But I don't want to be like Paul Wesley and like boo him out the building. You know what I mean?
And John, look at it this way. I mean, Paul Wesley may be a little bit skinny, but the Shat, I mean, he struggled with his waistline over the 3 seasons. So maybe it's a tit for tat type of thing,
Maybe. And Fat Elvis was only a size 32 when he died. Let's be real. Like, what is really? Fat? When he died, yeah, his costumes were in Graceland. They're like super skinny.
Oh my God. Well, yes, but I mean, that could mean a million things because I know people who have clothing made for them and they're like, no. And it's like, but it won't look good. Like,
there is a little bit of a pouch for the gut, but his actual waist wasn't that big. It wasn't like he was a house. Leave Elvis alone.
But you're saying his waist was like a 32, which I haven't been since like 5th grade.
Right.
So respect. He's the king for a reason.
Right.
Let's talk about this episode. First, going to the numbers. This is from season 1. It was it is said on Memory Alpha to be the 8th season of the 8th episode of season 1. Their numbers might be off 1 or 2. They do interesting numbers.
Are you kidding me? It's 115 on Paramount. Like I couldn't find it.
Well, the first season of Trek, the production and the airing order were so out of whack.
Right. That is true.
Yeah.
And this one was it aired December 15th, 1966. And there's like Thanksgiving in there. We don't know if they took a couple weeks off. We don't know. Why if we don't know, John, why do you do this? I know, because I don't edit myself. I'm a moron. This one was written by Paul Schneider. Paul Schneider, known for some fine writing. He's also the man who created the Squire of Gothos.
Oh.
So this guy's got some chops. Directed by Vincent McCavity. A guy named Vince. He's apparently Vince. And it is it's an early episode in terms of we do meet the Romulan commander. He is played by Mark Leonard. Mark Leonard, known more famously, I would argue, correct me if I'm wrong, gentlemen. More famously, Mark Leonard played Spock's father.
And the Klingon commander in the motion picture. Let's not forget that.
Oh, that's right. That's right. I love when they do that. When they do that, kind of winking casting.
He was the first guest actor to portray 3 different aliens in Trek.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And let me tell you something. I'm sort of jumping ahead as I say this, but I really do want this point to be made. I think Mark Leonard is an incredible actor. He really absolutely hits it for me. Yeah, Joe, you have some feelings?
Well, definitely. I mean, on top of that, you can find in trivia somewhere, maybe IMDb or Memory Alpha or both. But I mean, when there was a question of Leonard Nimoy continuing, they were going to go to Mark Leonard perhaps and have him just step into his son's role.
I love that.
The one thing I had too was, and I'm just going to throw this out there as more of a joke, but I don't know. Wouldn't it have been fun in The Quality of Mercy if James Frain, who's played Sarek in Discovery, played the Romulan commander in that episode too? Oh,
that would have killed me.
Loops upon loops.
I would have wept. would have wept like a child.
Don't you be teasing me weeping on camera. That's what I'm trying to do all season.
We're going to bust me up one of these days. One of these days, I will cry as we talk about Star Trek.
We'll keep working on it.
Right.
You know how I get, oh my God, when they plugged that little kid battery into the machine on that one episode of Strange New World. Oh, sorry, I didn't bring that to the air, Flobo. That's your show. I should have done that for you. Let's talk about the episode in specifics. Let's get to Balance of Terror. This is known as the episode of Star Trek that references World War II submarine movies.
Mm-hmm.
Had you ever seen any of these World War II submarine movies? Flobo? You ever see?
I'm not sure. Does Das Boot count? Das Boot? Does that count?
I would say it does. It of course comes after this. Because it was funny. I was even thinking like Hunt for Red October. Like, yeah, technically. I mean, it does. It was made after this was made.
Yeah.
The movie's more referenced in this one. Why does it take so long for my documents to come up? For heaven's sake.
Run silent, run deep. I'll help you out, John.
Thank you.
He's actually a better actor than I am.
The suggestion
I'll let him hang and die on a vine. Yeah, figure it out, Captain. You get it yet?
I'll get it. It's just awkward. That's all. Run silent, run deep. There was also another one called The Enemy Below.
Yes.
And they were both mentioned as inspiration. I do love this. This is from Memory Alpha. The plot of this episode is based on the 1957 film The Enemy Below, with the Enterprise taking the part of the American destroyer and the Bird of Prey with its cloaking device taking the part of the submarine. Director Vincent Micaviti had seen the film, but only noticed the similarity later. And when it was pointed out to him, he said, "Oh, well, obviously it's the same story."
Duh. War is hell, man.
What you got here, I think, is an effective Star Trek / sci-fi use of a subgenre, which is the claustrophobic submarine story in battle.
The sweat on the brow, the listening, the keeping quiet for 9 hours, almost 10. Yeah. It's a thing. And we should also mention that in the 1960s television, there weren't a whole lot of things you could watch. So they would frequently cross genres. There's only 3 networks. Maybe if you're lucky, you get 2 UHF stations where you live, and like 1 PBS station. That's all you had to choose from. So you would get like science fiction, but they're dressed like cowboys. It's science fiction, but it's a courtroom drama.
That's never changed. How many times have we called Strange New Worlds NCIS Space? Banter, crime, banter. See you next week.
Well, and that's part of the bigger picture, of course, is that Star Trek initially and to this day continues to be a sci-fi disguise commenting on political and social issues.
Well, absolutely. You're lucky, because now it's just too political. It's too woke, bro. Go woke, go broke. Okay.
And what I love is that Strange New Worlds just repeated the theme that's in this episode. They didn't feel they needed to reinvent that at all. The theme being that this war that had happened between the Federation planets and Romulus and Remus, we need to talk about that. It was a terrible war, and no one wanted to start it up again. And that happened here. That happens in Balance of Terror. That also happened in Quality of Mercy. That is such a strong theme. Am I just older, or does that theme really hit home? Like, we don't want to start another one of these seemingly endless wars.
Oh, now more than ever. Now more than the 60s even, I think. And we've all been there. Well, Two of us have been in the 60s.
I went there once. Or was that a trip? I forget.
I lost my mittens.
Yeah, so we've seen a lot of history and a lot of things happen over the decades, and yeah, it's no less, probably more relevant now than it was even then.
It's Flobo.
I would say it's even more dangerous now. I don't know how it was for those who lived, but in books, it looked like the United States were the undefeated champs back then. I felt like you guys would won every single thing. And then there's Vietnam, which was a fluke, and then everything else after that. So there is that sense of war, but then there's also domestic terrorism as well. And is that really good guy country versus bad guy countries? I think it's a lot more murky, at least from my perspective. So yeah, I hear you.
Right, and,
you know
and we're also hearing from our. I was just going to say we're also hearing from our friends in Europe that what's going on right now with Russia invading Ukraine, that Ukraine to the rest of Europe feels like Europe. Like this is a big conflict if you're living in Europe. It's big in a lot of people's hearts. Don't get me wrong. A lot of people care, but in terms of what's shaking the pillars over there, that's a really big deal. I'm sorry, Joe. What were you going to say?
No, my apologies. I cut you off, John. Thank you. The only thing I was going to point out is that, Khan Noonien Singh put it best in Space Seed. There has been technical advancement, to be sure, but how little humanity itself has changed.
Wow.
You can't be coming on here, mic dropping 20 minutes in. We got a show to do, Joe.
I'll try to ring it in a little bit, Flobo.
Joe is a classic pro wrestler from Japan. Lock up, knee to the face, tiger driver. Like, he is not there to build up slowly. He will hit you with the haymaker.
I got nothing to add to that.
Joe, thank you for being on this show. I'm going to thank you later, but I just want to thank you early too. Let's go quickly through this episode. I have so many notes, and that almost never happens. So
wow.
Pardon me,
like 7 lines of notes.
Dragged every. Oh my God, yeah, Craig Lubin. As to what we were just saying, I never thought that I would live in an era where we would be talking about a ground war in Europe, right?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. How insane, and how the more things change, the more things stay the same. Just nuts. This episode starts in the opposite of a Shakespearean comedy. It starts with a wedding. Doesn't end with a wedding. Students, write that down. It's all smiles in the chapel. And there's some argument over whether or not the chapel is a redress of the transporter room or a redress of the meeting room, the ready room. So any nerds want to go take a look at that? What a terrible...
The answer is yes. I'd be so proud. I'm like, it's the same room. It's like, whatever. What's in the scene?
Star Trek nerds love to know this stuff. Maybe you want to go look at those rooms. I think
it's a redress of the briefing room.
I think so too.
Do you think so? Okay. All right. So we have got a briefing and a briefing, and in comments, you guys let us know if you think it's a redress of the briefing room or a redress of the transporter room. I love that Scotty is setting up the shoplifter cam for the wedding. up high up on the wall so everyone on the ship can see it. Oh, that's sweet. And 2 of our officers are getting married, and I also like in this we see a little bit of religion, how it's done on the ship. First off, I'm not sure we've seen a chapel before on the ship, so that's interesting. But she so this is Martine. She bows at the altar like an Episcopalian girl, or Greek Orthodox or Catholic. And I love how Yeoman Rand, who's just behind Captain Kirk, like bows her head respectfully and sort of demurely too. I don't know. I'm a church kid. That's all very sweet to me.
That's something
Go
I
ahead.
wondered too. I don't want to say if there's like a combination of denominations, right? That sounds very blasphemous. But you think about how, like, in the Next Generation, how Jean-Luc Picard has an English accent because they basically said French has been basically rendered useless. I figured there would be some kind of contraction too in the future. So maybe.
And to that point, Kirk actually says, in accordance with our laws and our many beliefs, which is so interesting. We're talking about a blending of beliefs. Like my church that I went to as a kid that I still belong to, is a multi-denominational, as they call it.
Are you or something? Universal Unitarian?
No, we're Congregationalist, which is an offshoot of Methodist. Yeah. But that's very funny that you should bring that up because that's exactly what Craig Lubin was thinking. Yeah. A Unitarian church in space.
John is Methodist Wolfpack. Did you hear what he said?
Methodist.
Much like Romulans are offshoots of Vulcans, right?
Right. They're all cousins.
For life. For life. That is some bizarre old school WCW reference right there.
I'm here for.
I do love what Leo Genesek points out too. Not a ship's chaplain in sight.
True.
But if everybody respects everybody else's beliefs and they all have a turn and they all have a moment, that's lovely too. We love seeing that. This is also for me. I actually tried to do it here in my room. It was impossible to fake, but it's that weird. I call it the Kirk eye light.
Yeah.
Oh, it's just the shadow, Kirk's eyes. It's a big episode for that one. I do love to see
that. Was actually in my notes. I was like, why did last week's episode of Strange New World have these weird lights? And I was like, oh, okay, I get it. Because remember the big deal about Strange New Worlds, we're not doing flares, we're going old school. But yet, for some random reason, everyone's caught a 1980s like Venetian blind, and now I know why.
Well, not to mention the fact that the walls are always lit in some kind of bright hue.
Yeah.
And
I get it for this episode because it is pretty much the submarine episode and it's supposed to be very tense. That they're showing how closed in they are, and they're showing a lot of shadows and a lot of they want you to feel that sort of airless. God, I'm getting so hot just talking. Woo!
I'm excited, huh, John?
No, it's warm. This room is warm. I just don't want to make you guys look at my bare shoulders.
That's what we're here for, really.
Yeah.
The Star Trek's have a secondary.
I'll keep waiting for the reveal.
Yeah. Coming up.
All right.
This is pretty much the teaser. They're just about to get to the actual wedding vows, but oh no, there's a red alert, which was called by Sulu, which I thought was interesting. Sulu's calling the red alert. Everybody's got to get to basically battle stations, red alert stations anyway.
Yeah.
And then the credits roll. And then the captain's log, where he gives us the star date, which I could dig it up for you. What's the star date here?
Are star dates really that consistent, or are they kind of like whenever you want, or there's inconsistent ones throughout time?
I'm not sure at this point that they were solidly consistent.
And again, production order of the episodes, they would have been out of whack.
Okay.
Yeah. It's it becomes a lot more canon later, but it's 1701.8. The year being 2266.
Oh.
That makes everything clear, right? I know. Why did I do that? That's just wasting time. The captain talks about how there's Romulus and Remus and the neutral zone and the rest of the galaxy. And that kind of sets it up a little bit narratively. I feel like Remus doesn't get discussed a lot. It's confusing to me. Joe, do you have any insight at all on what Remus means ultimately?
Well, I mean, starting with the original Roman reference, I mean, Romulus and Remus were the brothers that founded Rome. Remus, of course, being the lesser of the two, the more shunned of the two. And we saw this depicted quite blatantly in Star Trek Nemesis, of course, when we actually finally got to meet the Remans for the first time. They were pretty downtrodden and oppressed, clearly.
Right.
So
They're sort of the monsters, kind of these swamp monsters, the Duck Dynasty of Romulus, if you will.
So here's my question, though. Not to jump in there.
Oh, please, Flobo.
Is it a triangle between the Vulcans, Romulans, and Remans, or is it kind of like a bridge where like the Vulcans are on one side, the Romulans are the middle, and then the Remans are on the other end? Like as far as their genetic relationship.
Remus, I thought, was either a planet or a moon next to Romulus.
I think you're correct, John. Again, it's depicted in Nemesis. I think they confirmed that at that point.
But genetically, they're not linked then.
Genetically, the Remans are mutants of the Romulans, which would make them very, very distant cousins of the Vulcans.
So it's like a line then. So it's like there was the Vulcan, the split, and then of the Romulans, the offshoot mutants are the Remans.
Yes, and it is made. There is a reference to it in this very episode, but many other places too. How the early Vulcan history has them being these bloody, terrible colonizers. And I love Nimoy, Spock's line, which is savage even by human standards.
Yes.
Said it on Thursday. That was my line of the week.
Bam!
Yeah,
I got it twice.
And it's a very obviously it's a very meaningful explanation of who the Romulans are. They basically took all the intelligence and all the power of Vulcans, which they have in multitudinous amounts. And one of the things that the writer was including, and I thought this was particularly cool, was that he wanted to. Okay, so Paul Schneider is credited with creating the Romulan Star Empire. There's a phrase you don't hear often enough.
Yeah, that's an older phrase.
Schneider said it's a matter of developing a good Romanesque set of admirable antagonists that were worthy of Kirk. I came up with the concept of the Romulans, which was an extension of the Roman civilization to the point of space travel, and it turned out quite well. Yes. Associate producer and story editor John D.F. Black, who's written some amazing stuff himself, says about Schneider, he was the father of the Romulans, not Gene, not me, not anyone else, Paul Schneider. And when he came up with the Romulan characters, they were wonderful. I mean, they were full. I liked that script a lot. I can see that you agree, Joe. What is it about the Romulans, especially in this episode, Balance of Terror, that really jumps out at you?
Well, the fact that they aren't too removed, well, they're clearly not far removed from Vulcans, but they're not far removed from us humans as well.
Yeah.
I mean, especially at this point, early on in the series, when we will, in a few more episodes, we'll get the Klingons in the similarly titled Errand of Mercy. Coincidence? I don't know. But they were pretty one-dimensional and remain so for quite some time.
Yeah.
Romulans from the get-go, I mean, they were complex beings. They had a culture. You could tell there's just from the one ship we saw, from the 2 or 3 characters we saw in their command center.
One thing I love is the whole bird of prey concept, which is one of the few things that anybody knows visually about the Romulans, because the Romulan Romulan Federation war that happened 100 years ago, as we're watching this episode, they never saw each other. They never spoke to each other. They were just at war. Flobo.
Yeah.
How badass is that, fighting someone you know nothing about? You barely even know what their ships look like.
That's kind of cool as a fan, because you get to say how we always delve into like what we think the enemy is and stereotypes and prejudice. But if that was me, I would be shaking in my boots. See, the commander's actually a fake rank. I have no training. I can't defend myself. What are we doing here?
You would be a fine communications officer on anyone's ship, sir.
Absolutely.
I maintain that I always think of us as the sons of Uhura. We who see ourselves as communications officers, the rare breed.
Yeah.
Let's
my man Bryce too.
Yes.
And it's too bad we didn't get season 5 of Enterprise, only because we were going to be treated to a depiction of the Romulan War from that era.
I would have loved that so much. I'm telling you, that would have been fantastic. Even how they were doing, all right, we can do it, Flobo. You don't have to. It's been a long road getting from there to here. All right, well, as we're driving everybody away, let's get some nerdy goodness from Leo Genesek. It has never been established in canon whether the Remans are an offshoot of the Romulans/Vulcans, or if they completely separate species, or even a crossbreed between Romulans and the original inhabitants of Remus. That would explain the visual differences. Remans, as Joe pointed out in the film Star Trek Nemesis, we meet Remans, and they're basically like orcs. Little orcs.
Yeah, for sure.
It's absolutely bizarre how different they are, but that is one of the things that I'm loving about Star Trek, that they were always good at. I'm just now noticing how good they are at showing you at how alien aliens can be. How completely, they're not just a different version of us. Right. As we're getting our explanation in this episode, I must recommend this episode to anyone who hasn't seen it, just so that you can see Spock's PowerPoint presentation of how the neutral zone works. I absolutely loved it. I would watch it every day. It is an incredible explanation.
Next slide, Captain.
And what the heck is Romi on the map anyway? I mean, ROMII?
It's so funny how the early versions of these planets and these civilizations are handled. We watched, oh my gosh, what was that one we watched about? Basically, it's very recent here on Starbase 80, Flobo. It was Matter of Honor, Honor of Glory.
Yeah,
Matter of Honor or Code of Honor.
Code of Honor, I think.
Not Code of Honor, because that's the one.
Oh, that's the bad one. Yeah,
that's the bad one with the black planet. Where
we saw that one though, which wasn't that bad.
Which is crazy because the one known for being the most racist episode of Star Trek, Flobo's like, not that bad.
Yeah, it's racist, not that bad.
Are you talking about Heart of Glory, perhaps?
Heart of Glory sounds right.
The first appearance of Klingons on TNG.
And at one point, one of those Klingons says, "I will never be able to return to Kling."
That's the downtown red light district. You know what I'm saying?
And then a Kling gonna get in some trouble. You want to go? But yeah, early on, they were gonna call the home planet of the Klingons Kling. So don't ever really get married to the first version of anything.
Oh, of course not.
Yeah. It's going to be improved at some point. There's a really bizarre little scene with Martine and Tomlinson. So the boy and the girl who are going to get married, they are. What the hell is wrong with you, Leo Genesek? Get some Kling on my sting. Dude, come on. It's Sunday. This little scene between Martine and Tomlinson where he's basically like, today was supposed to be our wedding day. And she says something like, you're not getting off my hook that easy. And then he says some bizarre thing like, well, I'm still your senior officer, so get with it, mister. And then she's got kind of like, oh.
Well, and I think that explains something I was going to point out while we're on the topic. Yeah. You know, Martine is like the female Kirk in this instance. We talked about how Kirk got over Edith Keeler in 1 week. Next episode. Well, God and surely, very next episode from Balance of Terror, she's like scammed on some other dude.
Is she really?
And I say, well, okay, so her fiance just prior to him dying pissed her off. So she said, well, he's dead. I'll just go on to the next one.
Look, man, so you know how hard it is to find a date in Los Angeles with 4 million people? I'm on a boat. I'm on a ship. Let me live, Joe Townsel. Swipe right.
I mean, I have such problems with the very last scene in this episode where basically Kirk goes to comfort her, and she gets right in there for that hug. She gets right. Oh, get over here, you big lusty son of a gun.
Yeah, that's some captain meat there.
She's working her way up the ranks. She's a Black Widow, says Leo Genesek. My question at that point was, are we still rooting for them, this couple?
It is very peculiar. Especially her expression. Like, well, screw you, buddy.
I got a big shrug out of you, Flobo.
I mean, no one said if anyone objects, so I'm going to keep my mouth shut. But I have you know that you can return my gift within a year with a receipt. That's all it is.
Just put it back into the replicator and turn it into
you know what?
soup.
She got hers on the alternate timeline, right? So it all worked out.
I mean, that was bizarre on the Strange New Worlds version of this story that it was. And you pointed it out at the time, Joe, which was super cool, by the way.
Well, thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Very, very, very much Joe Townsel's leg. When you see the Bird of Prey, any feelings about that ship? Because there's actually a little bit of backstory to the Romulan ship. First off, I love that you can be fighting an interstellar foe and he's got like basically a big bloody clawed hawk on the bottom of his ship. That's a little intimidating to me. Anyone else?
I'm fine. We good.
Well, I think you got a little bit more effective in later iterations of the series when the Birds of Prey and the Romulan warbirds are a little more detailed and advanced. But the spirit is there for sure. I mean, Stiles pointed it out himself. He says, all I know is that they got a giant bird of prey painted on the underside of their ship. They're predators. Well, that's the message meant to convey. And it works. On a 60s level, And
it is very Star Trek. It's very Strange New Worlds. It's also very classic Star Trek that we meet these aliens and they have basically taken a predatory role among the other races of space, which is creepy and scary and makes for good stories. So I'm all in for that. There was a part that was actually cut out of this ship. I'm sorry, of this show. It's hard for me to read and talk at the same time.
I mean, this is a star base, technically.
The idea behind, all right, come on, where are you there? The idea of the ship is addressed at one point in a scene that was cut out, a little bit of dialogue that was cut out, where they realize that the science of the Romulan ship is very close to the shape and build of a Federation ship. And as they originally explained it, it's probably a portion with the doomed Commander Hansen was filmed but cut from the final episode. So Outpost 4. Outpost 4 has Hansen there, and he's talking to them basically as he's being murdered by the Romulans.
Whoops.
He mentions that the Romulan vessel is of Starship design, and that Romulans had probably stolen Earth designs via espionage and traders.
That seems awfully racist.
That is brought up early in the episode. It does come back later, which is, I think, pretty interesting.
Well, there's a USS Reliant vibe to the Bird of Prey on some level. I mean, its basic design, a saucer with two nacelles. Hell, it looks like Enterprise from Enterprise NX-01.
Honestly, when we were watching Strange New Worlds, the first time we saw that version of the Bird of Prey, I was like, wait a minute, that looks just like it's from Enterprise. And so I really do like that idea. And that has happened in the past where like they'll take spy photos on some Chinese base and they'll find some American bomber that they basically built using plans that were stolen. And that happens. That's part of war. So it's very creepy, but accurate.
Yeah.
Oh, And we do want to get that idea that maybe there are spies for the Romulans, because it turns into a very big deal. And we're getting there. They discussed the cloak. I think this is one of the first times anyone in Star Trek has ever had to deal with cloaking technology.
I think it is the first time.
And they do notice a couple of things about it. It takes a lot of power, so they in order for them to fire their weapon, which takes even more power, they have to decloak. I think that remains in Star Trek, that if you're using a cloak, you have to decloak in order to fire.
Until we got to Star Trek 6, when the Klingons developed one prototype that could cloak, that could fire while cloaked. But all the way to that point, that was the limitation.
That's
was that a positive choice or a negative one?
I think it's part of evolution in the storytelling. Yeah. I know I didn't mind it when I saw that. It's an awfully good question. How do you feel about that, Joe?
Well, I mean, it does kind of speak to not to the evolution of storytelling, but also just to the evolution of the characters and the series. I mean, after 25 plus years, by the time we get to the Undiscovered Country, have we not overcome this hurdle yet?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's no sooner is cloaking technology introduced than the ways of getting around cloaking technology are begun, and they do evolve over the series and over the years. That's very Star Trek. You know, I can't object to that. That's very much how this show works. Once we basically know what we're dealing with, they catch an outgoing Romulan message coming from the ship. And this is the key moment of this episode. It was also portrayed in the episode of Strange New Worlds. And that is, we see onto the ship and we see that those bad guys, those big bads we've been looking at, look exactly like Mr. Spock right over there.
Mm-hmm.
And now the story goes from just being, and apparently in Run Silent, Run Deep, which I have not seen. I know it's
Nor have I.
There is a subplot of maybe someone on the ship is working with the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
So this is also, pre-set up, but a constant source of conflict. And really, okay. So how is this setting off your racism radar, Mr. Boyce?
It is funny how I say things are racist a lot in the show.
No, we ask you.
No,
we want to know.
To me, it was kind of like more like the familial thing. Like, yo, that's your cousin, bro. Like, yo, talk to your mans. I didn't really think it was more race kind of a thing, but I didn't know if it was an issue of limitations from the production side or whether they had this idea of like the split before. But it did seem kind of like, oh wait, these guys are very similar. I know. Let's explain it with the line dialogue. But yeah, I didn't think it was racist.
I mean, we do get a scene later with Mr. Styles. Quick background: Mr. Styles' family was heavily involved in the military during the first Romulan War, so he lost a lot of family members. So he's like, Romulans, we gotta kill them and start a war again. And everyone else is like, well, I don't know about starting the war again. And he just turns into this. I know it's Sunday, but I can't find another word. He turns into such a bitch.
Damn.
Well, he's a bigot, based on experience or otherwise. He is, and I thought of Flobo actually. Well, both of you.
What?
I did. I thought of
Flobo. What?
I thought of bitch Flobo. No, just
It's
I thought of
not
Flobo
like
because
that,
he has
Lobo.
this quotes of the week, and to me, the quote of this episode is clearly, leave your bigotry in your quarters, mister. There's no room for it on the bridge.
Honestly, I was going to use that opening quote in the credits because it is just such a great It's a great quote, but instead I tried to use a fleeting picture of a Romulan warbird so that it looked like
it works.
It looked like it decloaked very quickly. Leo Genesek laughed, so that's all I need. Now I want to ask about that quote though, because it is a great quote. There's no room for bigotry. Leave it in your quarters. Why can you have it in your quarters? There shouldn't be any bigotry at all. Am I just being too woke here?
I mean, let's be real. Everyone's a little bit bigotry. Everyone's a little bit racist, and so no one's looking. You'd be like, "Yo, bro, what is up with them remans? Am I right? Like, get a dental plan." Like, I'm totally that way when no one's watching me.
Well, and also, John, if there is an argument to be made by people that can perceive wokeness in a certain way, their response to that's going to be, well, I can't tell you how to think, but I can tell you how to act under my command.
Right. And that's the thing. We're on a ship here. So behavior is very, very important. But yeah, obviously I can't tell you how to think. And let's face it, if he wasn't racist, we wouldn't have that great lesson that he learns later in the episode.
That's right.
To ruin it for you. And just let you know, he finds out he was wrong. I just love the reasoning why that happened. Because a guy on the Romulan ship, and now we flip over and we're watching what's going on the Romulan ship, which is, I mean, honestly, to me, the best part of this is watching the Romulans. I never remembered it that way. It's how I feel right now.
Yeah.
Flobo, did that do anything for you when we were spending time on the Romulan ship?
Yeah, like I said, I like the idea, and I know now I understand it more because it was the first season of having that mirror match, of having that that battle of wits. Although much like westerns versus revisionist westerns of like the Outlaw Josie Wales versus like any other Clint Eastwood movie, it is interesting to see the internal conflict of the Romulans on Strange New Worlds last week or this week, and seeing what the conflict was this go around and how things have changed, priorities have changed.
Yeah, the oh my God, that's funny. Keith Jacobson puts up Styles was wrong. Spock is one of quote unquote the good ones.
Doom. Sheesh.
Oh, Greg Lubin jumping in with, we get to see Lieutenant Styles bringing up Vulcan racism to make even Dr. McCoy uncomfortable. He's a green-blooded hobgoblin, but damn, gee,
he's our green.
And you know what, guys? I mean, at the time, I thought it was a little bit heavy-handed and weird, like a lot of people. But in retrospect, Enterprise painting the Vulcans in a certain light in that prequel setting kind of lends some weight to the fact that maybe even in the 23rd century, the Vulcans aren't entirely trusted then either. So you see the Romulans there. Oh, wait a minute now. You know.
I absolutely agree with that. One of the things that I get out of watching Enterprise is how the differences between the Vulcans and the humans are really hard to get rid of those differences. And that there's not a lot of trust. I think as far as revisionist history, it was interesting, this antagonistic relationship the Vulcans have with everyone. They treat the Andorians like crap. They treat the humans like crap. I really like that. It kind of shows you, where the Romulans come from, what kind of attitude that is there. I don't know if anyone noticed. Now, clearly, Mark Leonard plays the Romulan commander, or as I was calling him in my notes after a while, Romcom.
It feels good on the inside.
There's also the Centurion, who's an older man, and I like to call him Romulan Stewie. We're in trouble now.
Why does our Snagglepuss all of a sudden? Trouble even.
Get into the neutral zone. Stage left. But there is a guy who is a total sniveling, creepy troublemaker on the ship named Decius. Do you know who plays him?
I know, but I'm going to let you reveal.
Flobo, I am so excited to tell you
Excited.
that Decius, the backstabbing, sniveling, awful Romulan, is played by the same exact guy who played Ston.
Stun.
Ston!
You know he don't love you. Stop.
I did my total Jerry Seinfeld the minute I saw him on screen. Hello, Ston.
Couldn't find a Vulcan supercuts if you tried.
The same exact actor, and as Joe had pointed out earlier, when it looked at one point like maybe Nimoy would leave the show, they were looking at Mark Leonard. They were also looking at the guy who played Ston and Decius to maybe replace Leonard Nimoy as Spock. Can you imagine? That guy's your Spock.
They would have put him through the rigmarole that we saw in Strange New Worlds on Thursday for real. They would just killed off Spock at that point.
There's I gotta go to the comments because I love them so much. Craig Lubin says Ston. Keith Jacobson says Ston. Leo Genesec says that explains so much. And then Keith says Jinx. Somebody owes somebody a Coke here.
Oh, by the way, Keith Jacobson follows me on YouTube, man. He's a real one. What up, Keith? Hey.
Keith is awesome. All of our viewers, always awesome. I just very much felt that the Romulan scenes were very Julius Caesar by William Shakespeare. There's a lot of philosophy. There's a lot of arguments. There's a lot of palace intrigue, a lot of backstabbing, and it just gets worse for them. Eventually, Centurion Stewie pushes Rom-Com out of the way of some falling. Can I just say, as beautiful as the Romulan ships are on the outside, every time they take a hit in this episode, like plaster falls.
Yeah, I was gonna dirt and dust.
Like, are you really making your interior of your ship out of sheetrock? You should probably stop doing that.
That is very elitist. You know there's no rose out there. Gotta make do with it.
Some poor Romulan drywallers crying right now. You know.
Drywallers. Damn you, Captain John. Okay. Well, it is 2 minutes till noon, so we should probably get to the second half of this episode. We don't need to go step by step, scene by scene, John, who wrote these notes. So let me see if I can. We see some interesting stuff. I'm just gonna pluck things. Basically, what happens at this point is the two captains, Captain Kirk and Rom-Com, try to outthink each other in a game of cat and mouse. So this will take care of about 20 minutes worth of the show. They do, however, the Romulans, they do manage to return fire. This is after Kirk has. Okay, how does everybody feel about this? How does everybody feel about the fact that phasers in this episode are A, the only weapon they have, and B, phasers are able to do everything. They're able to be a beam, they're able to be a depth charge, they're able to be a bomb. Is that weird phasering as far as you're concerned, Mr. Townsel?
Well, it is, but again, take into account we're early in the series. Certain things haven't been established yet. I mean, why do they look like photon torpedoes, even though they're phasers? Why did Kirk not send down a shuttlecraft to get the guys off the freezing planet on the enemy within? Because there's no shuttlecraft yet. Right. So these are continuity glitches that would get ironed out later, but that's the way it was at the time. So
yeah. Flobo, did it bother you at all to see phasers used in such a loose way?
Different time period. I think now, like, well, what kind of phaser class is it? I'm a Men in Black fan. When they bring out the guns, I'm like, is that the deatomizer, the neuralizer? But like back then, it's like space things, ray guns.
Yeah, they were building it as they went. So sure,
Mhm.
I can cut them that slack.
Mhm.
There's a little bit of tension and basically the whole idea early on, even when Captain Pike was in Menagerie and they were putting together their very first pilot, there was an idea that there would be a yeoman around with a clipboard and she would be like taking notes and stuff. Yeoman Rand is featured prominently in this episode, and there's like some like I'm so scared canoodling on the bridge. What the hell? What is that all about?
Hey, it was her last episode. Come on, gotta give her something.
Was this her last episode?
It was her last one. We wouldn't see her again until the motion picture.
Oh my god!
Because in the very next episode, surely we have a different yeoman. Redhead.
Oh my gosh, I didn't even notice that.
I feel like it's supposed to be like an audience surrogate. We'll have someone in here to understand the spacey things, so everyone watching at home. Oh wait, they don't need this person.
The explanation bimbo. Always great to have one.
I got to
those.
compare this to other CSI references because that's what I do all the time. But remember, in season 1 of Miami, there was like Amy Delaney, was it? Kat Delaney? That was like the partner of Caruso's character, and she just like disappeared, and we never saw her again.
Amy Brenneman?
I think
right?
I don't remember. I think
yeah,
was Delaney.
Delaney.
But,
no, Kim Delaney.
Kim Delaney, that's it. And she would say, like, that's a piece of evidence, Horatio. And then after that episode, I was like, you know what? We don't really need you anymore.
Honestly, when something like that happens, I always go blame the guy who didn't get fired.
Right.
I blame David Caruso for that because I'm sure he was like, oh, do we really need her?
Well, similarly, I mean, an important reference here, guys. What about I can't remember the character, but what about the one sister that walked up the stairs at the end of a season of Family Matters and never was seen again?
Oh,
Judy.
Upstairs,
anyway.
Yeah, Judy. Yeah. Black hole.
There's always a way that like Richie and Joni from Happy Days, they had an eldest brother, Chuck. And Chuck disappeared. And then later, when Richie gets married or Joni gets married, their dad talks and he says, "My 2 children. I love my 2 children." Wait a minute, you had 3.
Well, wait a minute. He said, "I had 2 great children." That could mean that Chuck just wasn't so great. That's why I got banished from Milwaukee.
That's even worse than being ignored. I had one mistake.
Damn. We have been these are some good comments here. Keith was saying, was this the first time ship's phasers had been used at all? Maybe. I'm not sure. Craig says photon torpedoes had not been invented yet. They were established in the arena. Photon torpedoes were established for the Gorn episode arena.
Agreement there.
All excellent pieces of information. We have Bones taking a role in this episode as the guy, let's not restart this war. Let's not answer World War I with World War II. Mm-hmm. He's very emotional in this episode. Like I'm not even sure how much the script justifies that. Was Bones cool with everybody in this one? Flobo, how'd you feel about Dr. McCoy?
So it does seem kind of out of character for this, but there really was no one occupying that space. And so if everyone that's available, that's the one you could turn the most, because Bones, I won't say he's emotional, but he's one to act out. So I guess he can act out the other way. But yeah, it does seem like I woke up today. It was like, oh, I'm sad. I must let everyone know.
I think you're right. And there had always been that idea too, that Spock is the brain and McCoy is the heart. And he's got, Captain Kirk has both of these sources. He's got the very human McCoy and the very logical Vulcan Spock to help him out making his decisions. So, yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. It's a lot of working. He is doing a lot of acting labor to get that across. And there's that really weird speech. I don't know if I've ever seen Kirk do this before, where he's basically going, "Why me?" Did that bother you at all, Flobo?
No, not at all. Again, it's one of those situations where we have that mirror match, right? So everyone, Ryu versus Ken or Ryo versus Ken, you have to have everyone doubt their abilities. And so you had Kirk being all swashbuckly and saying, let's do it. So this is now the first time him being like, what's the reason? Why am I called to this? Blah, blah, blah. So I was on board with that for sure.
And one reason we may not have seen that doubt in our episode of Strange New Worlds was that Kirk wasn't really in command, so he didn't have to be quite as apprehensive about what he was going to do next.
Very good point. He was not wearing the crown there.
Exactly.
Very, very good point, Mr. Townsel. Just running up through this, more cat and mouse, and then finally they are just about to do the killing blow to the Romulans, and then there's a purple gas attack. Spock goes into the phaser room. Again, I'm not sure I've ever seen a phaser room before. That, of course, is where Tomlinson is like a middle management officer. Martine basically is running, a keyboard. And there's some other guys wearing like the really awesome like engineer coveralls, like the really good looking ones.
Yeah.
Spock goes in. He does fire the phasers. He does save everybody in there except for Tomlinson. Dodged that bullet, Martine. That guy was not going to be a good husband.
That male chauvinist bastard. He got what came to him, Come on.
Okay, you're another person who won't do my eulogy, Joe. That bitch is a bigot. I'm so glad he's dead. Oh, no. JK.
The end of this whole thing is the Romulan commander, Romcom, talking to Kirk, and them having a very honorable, like that World War I, where the German flying ace and the the guy flying for the Allies like salute each other. That whole we're two of a kind, Captain Kirk. That whole thing happens. Is it
the biggest
too much?
cliche, I think. The biggest cliche. Joe, let me ask you this. You're not too different, you and I. It has to be so overdone, right? It has to be.
Well, this is where it came from, though, Flobo.
Oh, come on. Really?
I'm pretty sure. I mean, that exact line, which I'm going to use again when we sign off. Wait for that. But, I mean, this was reused by John Byrne, who did a reboot of Superman in the 80s. Batman saying the exact same line about Superman.
Yeah.
And of course they reused it, of course, in this last week's Strange New World. So I don't know if the sentiment is unique, but I think that particular line and delivery is unique to this episode. It's first time use.
Fine.
Yeah.
It's old enough, I'll allow it.
It's really interesting too, because it also points out how separate they are from their sides. Like they're not just fighting for their side. They also fight for honor. They also want to do the right thing. I love that the Romulan commander does not want to start this war. They're going to go home, report all the things, all the people they've killed, all the things they've destroyed, how weak and vulnerable the Federation is. And he is sick at the idea that now there might be another never-ending war with the Federation. And specifically because he says we've lost hundreds of people doing this. And is it worth it? Is it worth it getting into another war? This anti-war sentiment, of course, comes in 1966, I believe.
Right.
And yeah, Vietnam's going on at the same time. And Vietnam did not end for quite some time. I know they did not see an end to this war when they were writing this. So, yeah, there's a lot behind this. Basically, Styles realizes that Spock saved him. And I do love the, I just want to say Mr. Spock's really great, especially after how I treated him. And Mr. Spock's answer is like, I don't care. I don't have feelings.
Right.
There's been much resources put into your training as a lieutenant or whatever.
I think it's even a better answer. Yeah.
It's just see, now that's a good answer to you, Flobo. You don't think that's just the green ice water in his veins?
I mean, that's definitely true. He could have been like, you know what I mean. Your apology is insufficient, and then bitch smack him. You know what I mean. Hey, but I do think that Spock being like it's business as usual in this instance, being able to be unfazed, undeterred, having someone come with them hat in hand and make him feel awkward is so cool. That's what we dream of. That's what I dream of him in the shower, winning all my arguments every day. Just be walking out and just being the strongest person in the room.
And it's a great vocal way of saying, you know, no worries, bro. Anytime.
Yeah. Seriously, we work together. It's not a big deal. We could all learn a little something from Mr. Spock.
Of course.
We have at the very end of this, I'm not sure they've ever ended it like this before, where Martine says to Captain Kirk in the chapel, "I'll be fine." Which again is like, I actually believe her. I'm not sure how aggrieved she is.
Well, she's already got her eye on that other guy she sees in the next episode.
She walks out, and then he walks out, and then the camera goes with him and shows closing credits. I'm not sure how often that had ever been done before. It looked like something from a medical drama. It looked like sort of Welby or Medical Center or something.
I was like Quimby. Wait, that was not different kind of show.
That's so Enterprise,
right?
Okay, so let's Craig Lubin points out, well, her fiance had a relationship with her, a subordinate officer. She dodged a bullet.
Yes.
Yeah. Craig also says, some say that Chuck is still in his room even today. That's the Happy Days reference from earlier. I only have this left on my notes. There is nothing sadder in this episode to me than Scotty's bangs.
Oh,
just get some dippity do and just comb down. It's just awful.
I can imagine that day. Like, hey man, the Romulan budget took everything else. Just use his comb, do the best he can.
Hairstyles definitely the stories didn't by and large, but I think the hairstyles definitely improved in season 3 for everybody.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, not to be a total jerk, but I believe that's when Shatner started wearing a piece. I'm not absolutely sure. And
you gotta work, maybe.
You gotta work really hard to make those things look good. I do my best. I don't know this thing. I shouldn't have gone with cat. I should have gone with human hair.
Must be nice.
It's phony, folks. Okay. Do we have any Townsel tidbits?
Hey, I do have one or two left.
Talk to him.
This has to be another momentous episode in the sense that it's the first time we saw poor Uhura running the wrong way, going uphill on the bridge when they get knocked to this side. So that's an infamous moment.
I noticed that, and it's like she did like this, like ta-da, like this big dancer move too. I kind of loved that.
Plus, I have to wonder if Lieutenant Styles is related to the Captain Styles of the Excelsior some years later.
Ooh, that could
I don't
be.
see why not. Names almost never reused. Well, reused.
They're almost always related in some way. I mean, Decker, Styles,
There's a long tradition of Styles in Federation. That's canon from this episode. Yeah, why wouldn't that be true? Anything else you got, Joe?
Just not a tidbit maybe, but just I didn't want to do this much extensive research as far as looking at several episodes of Enterprise, but did we never have visual contact with the Enterprise and other ships?
Apparently
maybe not. Because apparently, according to this episode, Balance of Terror, that was not possible until recently.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah. I mean, I don't know when they installed the big TV.
Yeah.
The big TV.
the UHD or whatever.
The Radio Shack special.
Mr. Boyce, what do you have in your
Well, I've been looking at these tabs all day trying to find one chaplain training because I want to draw my own wolf pack. The story of Romulan and Remus from the ancient times, a look of all the ships in that canon, and I have trying to find merch with that "Leave Bigotry in Quarters" line. Nothing really. So there's a good merch opportunity if you don't get sued from the people at Paramount. But on my notes, I said, hey, this set doesn't look like Strange New Worlds. This is wrong. You guys got to do it right. It's the worst show ever, guys. And I didn't realize the bride was so hot when she was getting married. And props to Strange New Worlds for making this dynamic and taking tendrils of this one and moving it this one. And the lines being reused, the Spock line, the switching the visual line. It's really cool how it is. But ultimately, I would say it's interesting to see TOS episode after seeing the Strange New Worlds one. A lot of talking, and it was kind of a snooze fest. Don't shoot the messenger. One man's opinion.
I'm gonna absolutely agree with you in terms of when I was a kid and I watched this, I felt like this was one of the most boring episodes that they'd ever done.
Besides which, how would you have enjoyed it if you saw Back to the Future 2 before the original?
I actually did.
But I
loved it. Two will always be my favorite because of that. But like 1, it was great, and 3 was cool.
Here's a great thing that Leo mentions, and I absolutely love this. There is a moment where the navigation chair is empty, and the captain orders Uhura to take it. This is in episode 8. This is like in the first 3 months of Star Trek, and they have Uhura driving.
Well, we found out later, I think canonically, that Uhura literally is 4th in command of the Enterprise.
I love it.
And behind Scotty, and for any kind of people to say, well, how can she like send communications from navigation? Well, we saw her secure her navigation station, transfer it to her communications, transfer to navigation. And if no other reason to have her do that, we got to have a nice little look at George Takei Sulu admiring her when she sat down.
Oh my.
George Takei, another great treasure, especially in this first season. I just love so much of what they do with Sulu. Yeah. It's just fantastic. Gentlemen, any closing thoughts you want to share with us, Mr. Boyce?
Always glad to have you, Commander Townsel. Make sure you come back soon. But I'm glad that we're able to see how you can remix classic TOS in a way that's pretty dope.
And Mr. Townsel, Commander Townsel, our guest officer on this episode, any final thoughts you might have about this one, Balance of Terror?
I've been saving this final thought for the whole episode. We alluded to it. I promised it at the end, and here it is. In this or any other reality, I am proud to call you both friends.
Aww.
Isn't that heartwarming?
Thanks, Joe Townsel.
Finally.
You got me. Okay, all right. Okay, you got me.
No! You make Captain cry!
Thank you for joining us. We absolutely adore you. Everybody, please join me in the LLHB. Would you please live long and prosper? Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
But really, remixes, am I right?